Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back in to bring you my experiences with Lightsmith Avenging Crusader Paladin. This has been incredibly fun after the latest patch, and I wanted to share some of my experiences and what I've been doing while playing it. If you haven't played Avenging Crusader before, you start changing Paladin where its wings in Avenging Crusader is now causing your judgment damage and your Crusader strike damage to convert into healing onto your allies. That healing also transfers into your Beacon of Virtue, and so you have a build where you have really high uptime on wings and you're focused on DPSing to heal, not too unlike a Disc Priest. And coming from playing Disc Priest, I really noticed how powerful I feel with wings up, that I can start muscle healing through a lot of danger without too much of an issue whatsoever. And the nice side of it is that the downtime is really comfortable because you have a lot of damage reduction in things like Devo Aura, you have Bubble, you have Sack. You also have some really cool tech that you can utilize with Lightsmith Paladin. Not only do you toss out shields to defend your allies and weapons to empower your allies, you're usually going to be using your weapons, for example, on just any of the DPS players, using your shields on either the tank or the DPS who might be in more danger than others. Usually I've been pugging, so I've just been kind of putting the shields on the tank. But you also have a really interesting passive ability called Tempered in Battle. And whenever one of your allies is wielding a sacred weapon, you actually can start sharing health with each other, which could be really insane and dangerous if you wanted to utilize it on your tank. So what I've noticed is, like, when you bubble yourself and have a weapon on your tank and your tank starts getting annihilated, it tries to transfer health to the tank, but obviously you're not taking any damage, so it just ends up healing the tank for a crazy amount. The downside is if you don't have bubble, or you don't have damage reduction, or you don't have extra healing to make up for it, it could also kill you. But it's some really interesting tech to start manipulating, especially in areas where you don't have as much output, especially when you know somebody's going to take additional amount of damage. When I was running in like Dawnbreakers, for example, having weapons on those players who had dot debuffs on them actually kind of made it pretty safe, because then you can continuously be AoE healing everybody and also distributing a bit of extra healing to those targets. Lightsmith has some incredibly cool talents like that, but they also have a talent called Hammer and Anvil, which synergizes to great effect with the Lightsmith build. When you pair it up with Awakening, your judgment, whenever you reach max stacks of Awakening, your judgment will automatically crit strike, which procs Hammer and Anvil for an additional burst of healing. And so what you're able to do is, yeah, you have Avenging Crusader as a major cooldown, but you also have Avenging Crusader's proc from Awakening that is also going to do a huge burst of healing, since it forcibly procs Hammer and Anvil, and all that healing can distribute through Virtue, so you can set up for these massive bursts of healing to basically lay on hands your party through any sort of danger that they might be in. So let's talk about what the gameplay actually looks like. You kind of have two different priorities when you're in wings and when you're outside of wings. Often what you want to do before you wings is make sure that you already have your sacred weapons tossed out. That is, having your bulwark. Often when I'm pugging, I'm tossing it onto the tank because they can be getting railed. Your weapons going out onto DPS players. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to like juggle around when they have cooldowns. You don't have to worry about that stuff. Just toss it to them and you'll be fine. Then you want to make sure that if there's going to be AoE damage coming decently soon, that you're then going to be setting up your Virtue beforehand so that you can then hit wings. And during your wings, you want to make sure you're focusing on not overcapping on Crusader strikes, but above all else, keeping that judgment on cooldown. You are going to have some talents in Crusader's Might that is going to reduce the cooldown of judgment when you hit Crusader strike. So it's imperative to pop wings, hit a huge judgment, use your Crusader strikes and not overcap them, and make sure you're using your holy power as best as you possibly can. Most of the time what I was doing was I was focusing on using them on either Word of Glory or Shield of the Righteous, depending on how much damage was out. If somebody absolutely needed healing, I would toss a Word of Glory onto them. But a lot of times, especially if I was kind of low on Crusader strikes and people were like decently healthy, I would usually use it on Shield of the Righteous to get my Crusader strike back a little faster, to give you more Crusader strikes, which then gives you more of those judgments. So my priority was judgments, Crusader strikes, spending holy power, Hammer of Wrath, and then afterwards I might use a couple of holy shocks. But most of the time, with high enough haste, you're going to be pretty busy using your Judgments, Crusader Strikes, Holy Power, Hammer of Wrath to be able to produce strong amounts of healing. When you're outside of wings, you play Paladin very similarly to how you would with Herald of the Sun, usually using Virtue whenever you have incoming AoE damage, keeping your shocks rolling. Usually you're going to be making sure you're using your Judgments on cooldown because there's a lot of different passive effects, including things like Greater Judgment, which give a ton of value for casting it. But primarily, you're going to be using your Holy Shock as your primary builder, followed by Judgment, followed by Crusader Strike, spending on Word of Glory if you need any single target healing, and then Shield of the Righteous for damage. When it comes to Holy Prism, if wings are up, it's pretty low on my priority list. So outside of wings, I'll predominantly try to use it on enemies whenever there's like decent party-wide damage happening, or I need to have like another spot heal. You can always cast it on an ally whenever you need to there. Keep in mind, this build also gets a lot of lay on hands since you're constantly trying to make sure you're spending all of your holy power. And so all of your holy power spenders with things like Tyrion's Devotion give you a lot of cooldown reduction for your lay on hands. You can be really aggressive with it whenever there's going to be big incoming damage. Lightsmith also has a passive talent that reduces the cooldown of lay on hands whenever an armament fades off of your character. So the more you're casting your armaments, the more you're also reducing the cooldown of lay on hands. So don't feel like you ever have to hold on to this cooldown throughout the dungeon. Just be aggressive with it. It is there to be used and be used aggressively. Same thing goes for running with Aura Mastery. You can always have that Devo Aura going. Retalent into Unwavering Spirit, so you have the additional damage reduction. That was definitely something, as I watched through my footage again, that I was just not using enough of, and you can be very aggressive with it because it has the lower cooldown, and you're kind of jumping between cooldowns all the time with Paladin. When it comes to Summer, keep in mind it was changed going into this expansion, so if you cast Summer on yourself, it'll trigger damage from your healing. So as you're healing people, it'll trigger even more damage. Usually the cooldown reduction, unless the DPS had asked for it, but most of the time I've been pugging, so I just toss that onto myself. Same thing with Spring for the additional healing increase. I'll try to time that, wait 5 or 10 seconds to time it whenever I might have like wings up or whenever there might be some priority damage happening. And then you have Winter for the additional mana regen. Divine Toll is also going to be your big cooldown outside of wings, since you have so many GCDs that you're trying to fit in and weave in whenever you are playing with Avenging Crusader. You kind of have like this glut of resources almost happening at once. Divine Toll is used outside of wings, and I am trying to be as safe as I can as I'm pugging and as I'm going through these dungeons, because you never quite know when somebody's going to stand in goo and you have to just blast additional healing. So of course, before you're using your Divine Toll, make sure you're putting Virtue out onto everybody. It works a lot like Powered Radiance, where it puts Virtue on the target and then the players within 30 yards of the target. So just kind of be mindful of who you're casting it on if there's any spread fights. A lot of times you can kind of just cast it off yourself if you're central location to everybody, but keep in mind how the positions are going to be working for it. A lot of times I'll try to be making sure I hold on to my Divine Toll a little bit more, or thinking about how I can use it for additional spot healing if I don't have things like Lay on Hands available to me. I want to have that Rising Sunlight passive where I'm getting the additional Holy Shock hits onto my ally after hitting that Divine Toll. Lightsmith Paladin has some really uncanny strengths whenever you're in a pug environment. Not only are you just constantly blasting huge amounts of AoE healing, which is amazing for when you're pugging and you don't know if people are going to use defensives or not, you have this capability to sort of layer on massive amounts of healing to muscle through even if people aren't using defensives. On top of that, you also have a bunch of kind of like sneaky ways to stop damage from happening or to very heavily mitigate it. Obviously, you have things like Bubble, you have Sack, you've got Devo Aura, the usual mainstays. If there's physical damage, you can use Blessing of Protection, of course, to shield those allies from damage. But to go back to those sacred weapons, this is also such an amazing part of the toolkit, which if you use it really well, you can get away with a lot, I feel like, in dungeons. Tempered in battle, once again, whenever a sacred weapon goes on to an ally, whenever they drop below 40% health, they take your health and then give it to that target. But what happens is it tries to damage you and then give that health in damage to the target. So what you can do is, if you know that there's going to be some dangerous pull, or you just don't trust this tank, or you just don't trust this party member to not stand in goo, you prioritize them with the weapon, pop your own defensive. And a lot of times, if you have something like Devo rolling or Divine Protection and you have wings, a lot of times I found I could just muscle heal through the extra damage I was taking, even though it's pretty risky. If you're doing a good job with your defensives and you have a health pot on hand, you have, your bubble available or something along those lines, you can take some extra pressure off of somebody else and continue just blasting healing in the process. Leech is an amazing, amazing resource for this as well. Since you're dealing damage, proccing Leech, you're blasting healing into everybody around you, also proccing Leech. You can kind of build yourself up as the tank for the group in an indirect way, not actually tanking the monsters, but you can also start mitigating a bit more for the rest of the party with these passives that Lightsmith is going to be bringing to you, which means you can make up for a lot of other silly mistakes that people are making. But it can come at the cost of additional danger. So you have to kind of practice with that. And that's one thing I've tried to be very aware of when I'm in these pickup groups. The areas that you can often feel weakest are when you're in between your wings and you've already expended your divine toll. Those are areas that could be really dangerous for being able to just push up health bars once again. You kind of have these dead areas that are short in duration, but they can be lethal if you're not timing your cooldowns appropriately. And so one of the other things you can do, especially when you're in a pug environment, is lean on Awakening. As I mentioned before, you get this massive lay on hands for your entire party with Awakening. Whenever you reach 15 stacks, after you've hit basically 15 spenders, your next judgment will automatically crit, which will proc Hammer and Anvil for a huge AoE heal to players all around that target's location. And that healing will also transfer through into Virtue. And so it might come at the cost of a bit of your overall damage, but if you were delaying, for example, your Awakening proc, because once you have generated that 15 stacks, it'll continue to generate the next stacks towards like the next event. You can actually hold on to it for, a couple seconds here or there if you think damage is going to be happening, to then set up a Virtue, let some of the damage start coming through, and then your Awakening proc, whenever you hit that judgment, is going to unleash a big burst of healing onto the entire party, kind of letting you catch up. There's been a few times where I'll try, when I get my Awakening proc back during my Avenging Crusader cooldown, and yay, it's great, you can get the extension, you get the additional burst of healing, but sometimes I felt like I want to just hold on to it just in case, let people kind of bleed down a little bit, and then basically lay on hands the entire group with a well-placed Virtue into Awakening Judgment to push everybody up, and you get that extra little burst to get you to the next level, so it gets you to the next cooldown of safety, you might think, where you're having Avenging Crusader rolling, you have downtime, you rip your Divine Toll, you take advantage of all the extra Holy Shocks and spenders and resources, then you have your Awakening proc that'll kind of carry you until your next Avenging Crusader cooldown. And that's how you're kind of juggling it throughout the dungeon, to be able to blast damage most of the time, kill off mobs faster with some really great DPS, and to make sure you're keeping people safe when you don't know if they're going to kick, you don't know if they're going to stun, you don't know if they're going to use their crowd controls at all. Lightsmith Paladin is really quickly becoming one of my favorite alts and one of my favorite things to play in pickup groups. So I definitely recommend that you give it a try, and I think that it actually has some very real potential, especially when you get a lot of haste, especially when you get a lot of crit to slam in big keys. Even though you might have to kind of hold on to some cooldowns here or there to make the most out of it, I love how well it can just blast huge amounts of healing to reverse the absurd amount of burst that is going on in all of these dungeons all of the time. Let me know if you have any other questions. The build is also going to be in the description down below. And if you ever want to catch this live, be sure to tune into the live stream or check out our live tab on YouTube, as we're going to have a ton of content for all healers. Big love to our patrons for making all this content possible. If you'd like to join them and check out some of our benefits for coaching sessions, check it out also in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all next time.